Oh yeah!
What's up, everybody? Wrestling Insight back with a new series. We're going to be doing tier list. As you see right here, we're on TierMaker.com, and we're going to be doing a tier list today of every N64 and PlayStation 1 wrestling video game ever. Look, when the PlayStation 1 came out, I think it was 95 in the United States. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was 9 years old. And then in 96 with the N64, I was 10. So I fell right in the age range. This fell right in the perfect spot in my childhood for me to enjoy the complete generation, and for it to, man, it hits hard for me. Okay? There's no generation of video game systems that I find more nostalgic, that I go back to and replay more. So I feel like I'm a good authority on ranking these games. Look, I can see something redeemable in nearly every one of them, aside from one, and we'll get to that later. That game is just terrible. Either for them being really good games, or I can find value in them through my heavy nostalgia. So let's get into it. First game in line here, I'm just going to go, this is random order. They put the first game is WrestleMania, the arcade game. This came out for a little bit of everything. Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, 32X, Saturn, PlayStation 1, arcades. And you know what? I think it is extremely underrated. Is it a wrestling game per se? No, it really is more like Mortal Kombat in a wrestling ring. But all of that added function of running the ropes and the different moves and stuff, it's way better than Mortal Kombat in my opinion. And it's wrestling, man. You could be Razor Ramon and slice people up. Your arm turns into an actual razor. You can spit out demons and tombstones at people with The Undertaker. Come on, man. Awesome game. Amazing game. Is it tough? Oh, hi. You're damn right. It's super tough. But it is still an amazing game. I'm going to rate it an A. Great choice. Because it is a great game. I wouldn't put it in the elite tier, but man, you've got to try it if you haven't. Next up is WCW NWO World Tour. Now look, this cover of this game alone brings back a rush of nostalgia. If you were there in, what was it, 1997 that this game was out, then dude, you realize this was in every pamphlet, every flyer for Walmart, Kmart, KB Toys, Toys R Us. This was a hot ticket, man. WCW NWO World Tour, you know, later on Revenge would come along and have much more features and a bigger roster, but for its time, WCW NWO World Tour is a banger, man, and you've got to put it in great. So we're going to put it in A tier. Next up, what have we got? Oh, WWF Attitude. Now, these two acclaimed WWF games, they're not good. Let's be honest. The moves in it, we mentioned Mortal Kombat earlier. Well, the moves in this game are even more complicated than those in Mortal Kombat. So imagine, you know, to do a tombstone, having to push up, up, down, left, right, down, triangle, square, circle. You get it. But they were such a big deal when they released. I remember getting all the video game magazines every month, and WWF Warzone and Attitude were big deals. Not only because wrestling was huge, but because the graphics at the time were very impressive. It was the first to introduce a create a wrestler mode. You could edit entrances with all kinds of cool options in those. And you've got to, gameplay aside, you've got to give it credit for everything else it did pretty damn good, honestly. And Attitude was the follow-up to Warzone, so I feel it's a little bit better. I'm going to put it in good, but not great. B tier. Next up, WCW versus the World. Now, this game is the entire reason I bought a PlayStation, or I asked for one for Christmas, rather. I asked my parents to buy one. And it is the predecessor of WCW NWO World Tour, WCW NWO Revenge, and all those AKI games. No Mercy. This is the predecessor of all of that. And, you know, as basic as it is, as limited as the roster is, especially on licensed WCW wrestlers, it's a great game. And it deserves its props. I think I gotta put it in good, but not great. Because it's just missing a lot of features that later titles had. Alright, next up, WCW NWO Thunder. WCW NWO Thunder was the follow-up to the game that's next in this list here, WCW Nitro. But Thunder, if I remember correctly, had a bigger roster. Had multiple arenas versus Nitro's. Maybe I think it was just Nitro. Anyways, it had a lot more wrestlers, a lot more features, but it was the same, just terrible gameplay. I mean, in Nitro there was only 2 fighter styles. I remember that. It was you were either a big guy or a high flyer. So Ric Flair was doing the same moves as Eddie Guerrero. Like, come on, man. What? Thunder's a little bit better. You know, I gotta put Thunder in. Let's go C tier. Back up again. So that's what we've got so far. We've got Thunder in the playable tier, C. Nitro, I know we just spoke on it. We're going to put it right into the fucking trash, man. Nitro is trash. I remember being so disappointed renting that one as a kid. And just wondering why I chose PlayStation when on N64 there was WCW NWO World Tour. I don't like Nitro. Trash. Next up, WWF No Mercy. Look, I don't have any personal nostalgia with this because I didn't have an N64 personally as a kid. I played this game with my stepbrother, his N64. Later on in my adult years, I've played it through emulation and all of that. So I know this game is amazing. Great career mode, great creator wrestler. Everything it does awesome. It's the peak of the AKI engine, and it is a must play for No Mercy. I would get flamed with down votes and negative comments if I put it in anything but S, because it would just be a travesty. Okay, next up, the second of the ECW games, ECW Anarchy Rules. Let's zoom in here. I rented Anarchy Rules after purchasing Hardcore Revolution that we'll get to later. Anarchy Rules was this Acclaim engine. It is indeed the peak of the Acclaim wrestling engine on the PlayStation 1. 4th game to use it. It adds a lot of match types that you would expect in an ECW game. Barbed wire matches, table matches, things like that. And it had blood. And blood would pool up on the ground and stay there. And for a while at least. And I just remember that being a huge innovation in wrestling games. And all of that stuff, things that you would expect from an ECW game. I love ECW, always did. So I really wanted to see a good ECW game. Roster's great in Anarchy Rules. Graphics are really good for what it is. It is the peak of the Acclaim wrestling games. And for that, I've got to put it in playable. You know what, guys? Now I'm going to put it in good. Good but not great. Anarchy Rules deserves that, because it is the best ECW game. And that alone warrants going back to it, right? That alone gives it some value and just like a novelty nostalgia factor. Okay, next up, Power Move Pro Wrestling. I did not own this game as a kid. My stepbrother did. He would come over weekends, bring it, and play it. It's a good game. Reminds me a lot of WCW versus the World, and how basic it is, though, how small the roster is, and things like that. Nevertheless, it is a good wrestling game. It is enjoyable, at least for a short time, and I gotta put it in playable. because it is missing any kind of licensed characters or anything like that, which I don't think I can put it in the same tier as WCW versus the World. Alright guys, next up is SmackDown 2 on the PlayStation 1. Know Your Role, and this may be my favorite wrestling game, period, of all time, guys. You just do not understand how many hours I put in with what I believe is just the peak, top-notch create a wrestler suite in this video game generation. The backstage brawling, you could freaking throw people off the top of WWF New York into oncoming traffic down below, I believe. Man, I played the hell out of this game. And I still play it on a regular basis. I'll play it a few times a week to this very day, which speaks volumes about this game. Tons of modes, a never-ending career mode, which, you know, the loading times and the sim and the matches can be frustrating, but look, you got to overlook that. It was a thing of its time. It was on a CD-based system, and they packed a lot into this game. That's a big reason for your loading times. This game deserves no spot other than right beside No Mercy, in my opinion. Neck and neck in the S tier. So we're going to put it up there, right up there in the S tier, baby. Next up is the original SmackDown. Now look, less match types. I don't think it had a career mode. You know, a little smaller roster maybe. But it laid the foundation that would come only like 6 months later in SmackDown 2. And I played a lot of the original SmackDown as well. We're going to have to put it up there in the A tier, baby. Alright, WWF In Your House. This came shortly after WrestleMania, the arcade game, and is very similar to it, but much, I mean, honestly, much lower quality and much less good. The roster I love in this game, and it is bigger than that of WrestleMania, the arcade game. The only positive that I can give In Your House, but I did not like the items that would drop and different things like that that really annoyed me with the game. Nevertheless, I mean, I got to put it in the B tier. It's good, not great. WWF In Your House. Worth going back to and playing for the awesome roster along. Alright. Okay, now we're here at the first ECW game. I went and bought this on release day. I asked my mom to take me. I had saved up money for like a month or two for this game because I was such a huge ECW fan looking forward to this game. What I got was a simple reskin of Attitude, period. That's it, man. That's it. Nothing about it felt like ECW. Roster, I remember, was a little bit on the small side, and it was just frustration, man. I felt like I had wasted my money, and it's got to go in the fucking trash right beside WCW Nitro. Okay, Backstage Assault. WCW Backstage Assault. A lot of people don't like this game. I understand. You know, you kind of limit yourself. There's not even a wrestling ring in this wrestling game, which, what the hell. But you got to look at it for what it is. The roster is humongous, features a lot of names that's the only video game they were ever in, which makes it worth going back to alone, in my opinion. And it's a novelty in the fact it's the last WCW game ever. We're going to put Backstage Assault in the C tier. It's playable. Next up, WCW Mayhem. Okay, here's what Mayhem did better than SmackDown. It had full, like, really impressive entrances and music. Graphics were fantastic. I mean, amazing graphics. The commentary was off the hook with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Tony Schiavone. Probably the best commentary for me personally in a video game ever. And yeah, it did everything right except for the gameplay. The gameplay was boring. If Mayhem would have had gameplay, I don't want to say just like SmackDown 2, but just faster paced, more arcade style gameplay, this game would be legendary. But as it stands, Mayhem has got to go into the good but not great tier at B. Give you a little look here what we've got so far with 4 games left. And then we're going to go into the worst game, absolute worst game on this list. There's nothing redeeming about The Simpsons Wrestling. Didn't play it as a kid, had no interest in it, always heard it was terrible from reviews and whatnot, and I played it as a child, or as an adult rather, for a few minutes, and I had enough. The Simpsons Wrestling is going to rightfully take its spot right beside WCW Nitro and Hardcore Revolution in the trash bin. Alright guys, the first Acclaim wrestling game on this generation of consoles was WWF Warzone. We see where Attitude made it into the B tier, good but not great. Take everything that we said about Attitude and just, realize this is the first generation of that game. Less features and stuff, but the nostalgia still is there. So it doesn't belong in B tier for sure. It's not bad enough to go to the trash bin. We're going to put it right here in C, playable. WrestleMania 2000. Improved upon World Tour, Revenge. Came right before No Mercy. And it's a fantastic game. I mean, World Tour is right there in A. You can't put it any lower than World Tour. Because, it's a better game, honestly. Even if you don't, even if you do prefer WCW's roster like I do. But it's not quite S tier. It doesn't belong up there with No Mercy and SmackDown 2. We got to put WrestleMania 2000 in great choice, A tier. And then finally we have WCW NWO Revenge. Look, this is the best WCW wrestling game ever made. And if you are a huge WCW fan, you grew up as a WCW kid your whole life like I did. Growing up in the South, that was the thing. Most of us were. We preferred WCW. Then this game will forever hold a special spot in your heart. And the roster is one of the best to this day of all time. So, for that reason, for those reasons, I have to put WCW and NWO Revenge right there in the S tier beside No Mercy and SmackDown 2. I've just got to give it the edge over WrestleMania 2000 because WWF fans, they got a way better game the very next year with a very similar roster. And again, where this is the best WCW game of all time. So there you go, guys. That's how I rank these PS1 and N64 wrestling games. I want to know if there's anything that you would change, though. Let me know if you enjoyed the video. Let me know, again, if there's anything that you would change down in the comments below. If you could be so kind, if you enjoyed this and would like to see more tier lists in the future, wrestling-related topics, then hit the thumbs up and subscribe and let me know, man, so you don't miss anything in the future. Until next time, guys, have a good one.